You might be working 8, 10, 12 hours or some other ungodly amount. You might even be a workaholic, but that is a topic for another day. We need to discuss what work life balance actually means for Gen Z and how that should be different for every single one of us, but we still have some basic common principles that kind of apply across the board. So, keeping everything simple, let's dive right in. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple and actionable tips. So, we're going to start off with kind of three main pillars of today's episode. So, going over the job you work determines your life outside of work, how in 24 hours, they actually are not all built the same, and the fact that we should be finding harmony in both work and life and less balance. That sounds a little weird, but we're going to get to that part last. So, jumping right into the first pillar here is the idea that the job you work determines your life outside of work. Trust me, I understand that sounds a little bit obvious, but it's a bit more nuanced than you think. So, first of all, time spent at work literally takes away from the time that you spend outside of work. It takes away from your ability to have downtime or dedicate towards personal hobbies or other aspects that lead to a more fulfilling life. Again, it sounds obvious, but it's something that we tend to forget. So that's why I mentioned earlier, you might be working a standard 8-hour day. You might be working a more common, apparently, 10-hour day. For myself personally, I've had all ranges of hours where my first ever job, I was working 8-hour shifts in retail. And on occasions, I get maybe half hour of overtime if they needed some extra coverage while they were waiting for someone to get in that was coming in late. Then right now, I currently work a job where I'm working 10-hour shifts with an hour lunch in there, which brings it to a total of 9 hours, which, again, is a bump up. But then I had 12-hour shifts when I worked in manufacturing, and that meant I was going from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and had multiple breaks in there, but still working each one of these jobs and each one of these timelines meant that I had to change how my life was structured due to the fact that I was going to have less time outside of my job to put towards either going to the gym, spending time with my family, spending time with my girlfriend at the time, now wife. But each one of these jobs asked a different thing of me in terms of my time. And so, of course, that means I had to adjust my life outside of it to make room for the amount of time I had to dedicate towards going to work and actually getting the job done. So it's important that you also have to take into account, maybe you have a boyfriend or girlfriend right now, maybe your best friend, their shifts are completely opposite of yours. Maybe you work in the mornings from like 6 a.m. to 2:30, and maybe they work from 2:30 to midnight, and they're trying to find time, or you guys are both trying to find time to do something together. And it's going to be hard because trying to find that balance between the timings that you have at work and the timings you have outside of work is going to differ. And there's going to be points throughout your career likely that it's going to shift. You might be working longer hours one job, you might be working shorter hours another, or you might even be able to make your own schedule and then it's all out the window and all bets are off. But it's just important to note that the time that you spent in your job at work is going to dictate, of course, how much time you're going to spend outside of it and what you're going to be able to actually dedicate your time to. And when I say actually dedicate your time to, that just means the fact that when you have a physically and mentally demanding job, that's going to impact your energy after you clock out. So picture this. You are in your 20s. For most of us in Gen Z, which I'm really focusing on here, we might want to go out to dinner with our friends. We might want to go out to the movies. We might want to go out and hit the town for a night, maybe a couple times a week. But the thing is, if you have a very physically demanding job. Maybe you're working in construction. Maybe you are a mechanic, or you have a very mentally draining job. Maybe you are a tax accountant, or maybe you are a business consultant. Then the level of energy you're going to have left after your day is going to differ very greatly from one individual to another. And that's going to impact the amount of, willingness you're going to have to want to go out and actually do these things. Great example is my younger brother, who at multiple points after he would get off work, when he was still working in shipping and receiving, would fall asleep during movies because he'd wanted to go out to them afterwards, but because he'd get there, he'd get comfortable, he'd get nice and warm in I believe it was Adobe Cinema, recline in the seat, conk out, just completely pass out during the movie. And it just goes to show that when you are having differing amounts of exertion and effort put out throughout the day, you just have to realize that that is going to impact what you are going to be able to do afterwards. Because if you have friends that want to have a game night and you are mentally tapped out from the day, then you're going to be less inclined to say, all right, yeah, sure, I can host a bunch of people right now, or I can drive out of my way to go hang out. You're going to want to, most likely, but it's just going to be a little bit harder to get your foot out that metaphorical door and to actually go do the event. And then for physically demanding jobs, it's even worse, because at that point, you just want to go home, you want to eat, you want to shower, you want to sleep. And if you go to the gym, you're going to want to get that in there at some point. But it just impacts, again, the amount of time you're able to dedicate towards other aspects of your life when you account for how much physical energy and mental energy you're going to have to expend throughout the day. Because there is a limit to how much we can actively do and not just crash at the end of it. When I talk about the mental aspect of it too, the type of job that you have is going to impact your ability to actually mentally turn your brain off from work. Easiest examples I have here is the fact that, so right now you have knowledge work and then you have more of the physical trade based work. So my mom has been part of a laborers union for well over a decade, and that is a more physical based job where she shows up, she is doing flagging, she's doing demolition, doing asbestos removal, whatever it is that she's signed on for that particular job. That's what she is physically doing. But once she clocks out and once she heads home and leaves, then she's able to just turn that part of her mind off and then not have to really think about it. But then it's different for myself, who works in a more admin-based accounting role, where I have my emails, I have my team's group chat, and I am able to check that at any point in the day. And at times I can check it even if I want to on a vacation or the weekend and think, okay, I have something that's coming my way that I need to mentally make space for, and I need to make sure that I get this part done. And Cal Newport makes a case for this in A World Without Email of, like, we need to be able to recognize that that just means that our brain isn't turning off from work. We are staying mentally connected and dialed in when we should be taking time to focus outside of that. And so the type of job, again, impacts your ability to actually turn that part of your brain off and say, okay, I've clocked out. I am not working past this timeline. And of course, there is seasonality to this. For some people, you want to get ahead. Some people, you want to make your mark and actually quickly rise to the ranks of your job or level up your skills to be able to move on towards that next step in your career. And that might mean that you do dial in after hours, and that is okay. But it has to be in seasons. It can't just be your entire life built around, okay, I have to give up my time in this way and never turn my brain off, because at some point you will burn out. But it's just important that you do let yourself recognize what type of job you have and how is that impacting your ability to actually truly clock out physically and mentally at the end of the workday. So comment down below, do you find it hard to shut your brain off after work, or do you find it to be pretty easy that you're able to clock out and call it a day? Let me know down below. But jumping into the second pillar here, we have to understand that not all 24 hours are the same. And there's three main points behind that. So with the pandemic, we had this acceleration of hybrid and remote work. And we have to then see that there's been a huge shift in dynamics because we have our on site work. So people are going in the office every single day. We have our hybrid work where you're able to go in a couple of days a week, or maybe it's alternating weeks. And then you have, of course, fully remote where you are on the other side of the country. Maybe you're zooming into your meetings and your timing that you get to spend at work is very different physically. And with that, that just means that you have a different level of control over your day with each different variation to how you work. So for on site, for myself, I actually prefer being on site, or I'd prefer like a hybrid situation where I'm able to actually connect with my team, see people in person, talk to them, have that metaphorical water cooler conversation where we're able to go over any problems that we're facing or have just these quick little problem solving powwows. And that makes it a lot easier in person. But that just means that, as I mentioned earlier, that impacts the time outside of work. When you are doing, say, hybrid work, then it's a little bit different because you can actually spend maybe some days you have appointments that you need to go to set for the afternoon or in the morning, and you're able to make your work schedule kind of evolve around it where you have that flexibility. And when you're fully remote, heck, you could do that a lot more easily because maybe you have to go run an errand for a quick half hour and it's down the street. Maybe you're going to another appointment somewhere, but you're still getting your work done. And that gives you a bit more flexibility. So the timing that you're spending outside of work becomes less of a concern and more of a, okay, how am I going to fit it in and still get my work done? Because then it might be results driven rather than just butt in chair, time spent typing away. I mean, this is why the stupid mouse jigglers are a thing, because you have this kind of hyper focus on, hey, you have to always be doing something. You have to look busy. You have to be on the phone. You have to be throwing papers around. You have to be blah, blah, blah. And then instead finding this results focused group where it's like, okay, you have your work that you need to do. Let me know when it's done. I trust you to get it done. And whatever you do outside of that is completely up to you. And then that again just impacts how not all 24 hours are built equally when we have access to them in different ways. And then not only that, speaking of access, you have to remember that we have those who can actually buy back their time and have a stronger, more productive and efficient 24 hours. So you'll hear often a lot of more financially successful people talk about this, whether that is like Alex Hormozy, Cody Sanchez, whoever they might be. If you haven't heard of them before, definitely check out their YouTubes. They are phenomenal entrepreneurs who give fantastic advice for building your own financial independence and how to do that through business. But enough of that plug. But they go over the fact that you want to buy back your time and you want to do so in a way that makes sense for you. If you hate cooking and you don't want to cook, then outsource your cooking. Eat out at more healthy restaurants, hire a private chef, join a meal service that like maybe is Factor or something that sends you these pre-made meals. It's just a matter of buying back your time. If you hate doing your laundry and that's so time consuming for you, then outsource your laundry. I know Sam Parr from the My First Million podcast talks about this as well. I believe him and Sean were talking in one episode about how they have a laundry service that they use where they just bag up their laundry, put it on their doorstep, it gets taken away, it gets brought back, nicely done and folded and pressed and everything, and it's good to go. And that's an example of buying back your time. It's the same thing with travel. You have people that will consistently and only ever carpool or get driven from one place to another, so that way they can actually physically be working or doing something else like taking a meeting and connecting with other people. And that's buying back your time. So not all 24 hours are going to be equal in that capacity, because you have some people who have the ability to do more because they've bought some of it back, because they've had either the financial success to do so, or again, as I said earlier, their job styling allows them to actually have that freedom and that flexibility. And then also you have the aspect of your family and friends. So how much time you can dedicate to yourself, and then how much time you have to dedicate towards your partner, your family, and your friends. So in America, we are a very hyper individualistic society. I really sounded weird saying that, so we're going to say it again. Hyper individualistic. meaning that we are so focused on our sense of self. We are so focused on the sense that we are our own individual, we are fully autonomous, and all this might be true. But then you have other societies where I am a dual citizen, so other half of my family comes from Guatemala, where it's a more collectivistic society. We are more family oriented, we are more community based, and there's a big focus on, hey, we do things for the good of each other, not just for the good of ourselves. But how much time you dedicate towards other people is impacted when, again, you either can't buy back your time, you don't have the job arrangement that allows for the flexibility, and so you have to make decisions every single weeknight of where am I going to spend my time? Am I going to spend my time going home and kicking back and playing Tears of the Kingdom, which I am currently in the process of beating right now, and I have so many questions, but that's maybe another video for another time. But then also then you have to decide, if you have a partner, are you making time to actually take your partner out on dates? Are you making time to go spend quality time with them? Are you able to set aside time during the week to go see your family, hang out with your siblings if you have them? Are you able to set aside time to go out on the town with your friends? Are you making time for all these other aspects? And so that's why I say not all 24 hours are built the same, is because you have to then factor these things in. If you want to have a good social life, you have to work at it. If you want to have a good relationship with your family, you have to work at it. If you want a good, healthy relationship in general, shocker here, you have to work at it. And that's where it becomes so, I'd say, just problematic when we, again, are told that we all have the same 24 hours. We can all do the same exact things. Okay, no. There's a reason Cal Newport's latest book is about slow productivity. Not all 24 hours are built the same. We have to accept that for some things, for some projects, it's just going to take longer than we want it to, but it's because we're working at it at a slower pace, because we need to make time for other priorities in our lives. You are multifaceted, and so you're not just going to be between work and your personal life. It's work and your health. It's work and your social life. It's work and your relationship. You have to consider how your 24 hours are split up and how you make the most of them, so that way you are not neglecting one part of your life over another. And that then brings us to the final pillar here, which is finding harmony in both work and life. And there's the three kind of main pieces of this puzzle. So when I said it's less about finding balance and more about finding some type of harmony, that is because balance indicates opposites. So you have to like picture two scales. You have one scale which has life on it, and then one scale which has work on it, and they are counterweighting each other, when in actuality they should be working together, kind of like, the yin yang symbol, which if you watch this on YouTube and Spotify, you can see that it has, if you've never seen this symbol before, then it is essentially a white kind of blob or raindrop that is intertwined with a black one, and there's a little bit of a white circle and black circle in the opposite sides of each. And this just indicates that there's this kind of balance and harmony that you should be trying to achieve that isn't easy to do, because if you are working to have harmony between your work and your life, that just means that you are actively deciding, I need to spend a little bit of time here. I need to make sure that my work is feeding into my life, because you work to live, you don't live to work, and that you are balancing out your purpose and careers together rather than having them be opposing forces. It is difficult, and I understand that, because being able to say, okay, my job fuels my life, and so it funds everything I do, but it doesn't fuel my soul or fill me up, then there's a bit of a disconnect there. But that's at most times and on average okay, because some people just need the job that pays the bills, keep the lights on over the head, keeps the food on the table, and it gives them the ability to save, invest, and go do things and have fun. And for some people, that's all they need. For other people, they want to have that more financially viable option where they're able to go out and do other things beyond the scope of what they would normally, have time for. Speaking about time and purpose and fulfillment, then we have to also think about the 5 pillars, which are kind of like this supporting guiding principle that I believe build kind of a happy, healthy life. And it's simplified down to 5 pillars. So you have your health, your wealth/career, your relationships, your fulfillment slash learning, and then spirit. All these things need to be brought into harmony as well because they are the things that, again, build your life up from a foundational perspective. As I was talking about earlier about not all 24 hours being built the same, you don't want to neglect your health in favor of your wealth and your career for a long stretch of time. You don't want to neglect your spiritual aspect of your life. You might not be Christian. I personally am, but you might be someone that studies Stoicism. You might be someone that really likes Buddhism. You might be someone who is agnostic, who might be atheist. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. We all need some form of a spiritual practice in our life. That's just been one of the findings on some of the longest study in human happiness. There's the importance of relationships, and then also there's just this anecdotal evidence towards spiritual support in your life. Now, I'm not going to get into that in this video, but it's just something I'll dive into probably in the future. And then you have your fulfillment in your learning, because you should always be learning something, because if you are stagnant and you are at the top of where you can be, then you're not going to be pushing yourself, you're not going to be growing, and when you're not growing, then at some point you have to be growing in some other aspects of your life. And then you, of course, have relationships, because you need to make sure that you are building and maintaining good, strong, healthy ones, because those are the biggest determining factors of our happiness in life and our quality of life, especially as we get older and our social circle gets smaller and smaller. But those are the 5 pillars that you have to make sure are all being taken into consideration. So that's why I say it's more about a practice of finding harmony rather than a practice of actually having just work and life, because that in itself is a bit too simplistic, but it's about that harmonious factor between the 5 pillars, because that is what impacts how work-life balance, quote unquote, becomes perceived. Because if you have one thing that's being neglected, then it tends to drag the others back too, and you will feel it eventually. But for some seasons of life, you may have to put other things on the back burner. It just can't be your entire lifetime. As I keep talking about these seasons, you have to understand that you are going to go through different seasons no matter what. So there's going to be seasons of learning where you are just getting your feet in the water, you're getting a feel for the land, and you're doing your best to grow and actively understand more topics and more about what is important to you. And then you have seasons of earning where you are actively trying to earn as much as possible. You're trying to set yourself up financially for the future, set yourself up, your family up financially for the future. And those are all great things. And then you have to understand that you also have seasons of growth where maybe you've hit that kind of financial goal and now you're trying to grow outside of your role. Maybe you're trying to reinvigorate your relationships. Maybe you're trying to spend more time with your partner. Maybe you're trying to develop a hobby that's going to keep you fit and keep you mentally sharp. And then there's going to be seasons of change where maybe you've gotten to a point where you need to evolve to keep on moving. Maybe you need to change things up and then start all the way back at square one in a new area and start learning that learning season once again. But you are going to go through these seasons multiple times throughout your life, no matter what. And so you have to just be prepared for what that looks like when you're trying to find harmony between your work and your life. That for some seasons, both your work and your life, you will be learning. For some seasons, you will be focusing on growing in your personal life, and you'll be focusing on earning in your professional life. Other seasons, it will be you are, because of a change in your personal life, that is going to affect your professional life. And it's just all about finding some way of keeping it all in check together, keeping those 5 pillars in check, and understanding that if you are putting one as a priority, it should be for a season of life and it should not be for a super long stretch of time. And time in of itself is a very odd concept. And I say this because for some people, a week feels like forever. For some people, a year is not enough time. But we often overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 3 to 5 years. So just understand the time horizons that you will be in these different seasons of life for, and that will help you find more harmony between the 5 pillars. So that way your work and your life aren't seen as opposing counterweights, but are instead seen as two pieces of a whole picture. Of course, ultimately, this is again all easier said than done, but if you are willing to put in that work towards balancing out the 5 pillars and not allowing yourself to be so sidetracked and pulled towards one aspect versus another, I believe you will be able to find a good way to create harmony between your work life and your personal life, and still find time to enjoy life as a whole. But with that, if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure that you like and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you know every time I upload a new episode. It means so much to me. If you're listening to us on Spotify or another podcast app, give us a follow and leave us a 5-star rating. It helps out the show so much by helping it get in front of other people just like you. Have an amazing day, you amazing people, and I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.